Hello, system thinkers. Welcome to The Question, a collaborative learning show intended to broaden your perspective on design systems. I'm your host, Ben Callahan, founder of Sparkbox and Redwoods design system community. This is episode 071, where my co-host Vitaly Friedman and I facilitate a deep dive on the topic of the criticality of design systems. If you have a moment, please get subscribed to the show out at bencallahan.com/thequestion. This week, we asked you 4 questions, all considered through the lens of your single, most critical consuming product. The first question was, which of the following statements most accurately describes the impact to the product's end users that would result if this product failed? And we gave you 4 choices: loss of comfort, loss of discretionary money, loss of essential money, or loss of life. The second question was, which of the following most accurately describes the size of the engineering team building that single product? We gave you a series of ranges: 1 to 6, 7 to 20, 21 to 40, 41 to 100, or greater than 100. The third question was, how do you ensure your design system adequately supports the criticality and scale of this product? And the last question, is someone in your organization doing workflow analysis with the users of this product? And if so, describe the approach. With all of this as context, let's get into it. Vitaly, tell us sort of what you're up to in the world, what you're doing with systems and beyond at this point in your career.
Yeah, I would say that for the last, I would say specifically for the last 9 or maybe 8 to 9 years, I ended up in a weird world of, I wouldn't necessarily say enterprise, but just complex systems. And what I mean is not necessarily complex design systems, but just complex systems and products, working everything between CPQ systems, kind of configuration of quotes, and a lot of B2B as well. Insurance companies dealing with transforming, I guess, insurance forms, PDFs, journeys into something that will be more applicable online and digital. Do now working with European Parliament for the last 3.5 years now, moving from 199 websites that they have into basically one.
Wow.
And that comes, of course, with 25 different languages. This also comes with a lot of challenges across stakeholders, different priorities, different interests, and you know the drill, I'm sure. And then along with it comes also the need to have a more systematic approach to design. And that ultimately brought me to the place which actually brought us to the notion of criticality, which is I have to measure everything. So I can't just step in an organization like this and say, I know what to do, I'm an expert, and I'm going to clean up pixels here, and I'm going to move them around so that it will be better. Because nobody really trusts me or feel like they can trust me. So I have to have a very clear before and after. So that means I have to measure the impact of what I'm producing. And especially in systems when I'm working, very often, I don't know if this is kind of a feeling that many of you have as well, I'm kind of being set on the side and I'm being told, you really cannot fail on this project.
Oh my goodness.
That's always very reassuring, right? And you really have to deliver on this project. And you need to make sure that it's better once we're done with this project. And so not only do we going to measure it, but also in terms of the impact that it has, in not only on the design, but also on the organization, right? Kind of really making waves, I guess, to contribute something positive to the organization. And when I hear this, I don't even know what to respond to that. It's like it's quite a pressure, and because everything is measured, I need to be certain that what we're doing here reaches or matches, I would say, the level of criticality and attention that it needs or desires, I guess, right? And so this has been a bit stressful at times, I would say, but oftentimes also quite exciting because it can do quite a massive change.
Yeah, incredible. And I've been in similar scenarios where somebody has said to me, this is not a project where we can afford to fail. And I know the pressure that creates. So that's a fascinating introduction for our conversation. If you're not connected with Vitaly, please jump into LinkedIn and Blue Sky, get connected. I know for myself as well, please connect with me. I love it when folks reach out and just want to chat, talk shop. That's the kind of thing I love to do. Vitaly, you and I met I don't even remember how we met originally, but I know that you and I
I
had
don't remember.
coffee in Berlin a
Well,
few
but
years
that
ago.
was just a few years ago. We met before that, way before that.
Yes, for sure. But we
But we
met
had
a
a
few
good
years
coffee,
ago.
not a bad coffee
We
back
did have
then.
good
I
coffee.
remember
We
that.
did.
Yeah.
We did. We met in Berlin a few years back to talk about the possibility of collaborating on, having your organization, Smashing Publishing, publish a book of mine. And so I've been working on that diligently for a while now, and so I'm excited to share that. It'll be coming out later this year, is kind of the hope. So you can see a little image of the cover that we've been working on, and you can see my announcement, and then also the Smashing announcement here. Very excited about this. It's a labor of love for sure. If any of you have worked that hard on a long form piece of writing like this, it takes a lot, and it feels like you're giving birth, I would imagine, in some ways. So lots of fun. Okay, let's dive into this. There's so much to unpack here. We sent this out to over 1,000 design system practitioners. We got 61 responses. As always, you can click this link top left in the FigJam to go look at the raw data yourself. And so that has emails and names taken out, of course, but it just has the raw answers. So please take a peek at that and let us know what you find. There were the first two questions a little bit more quantitative in nature. The first one was about the criticality of your most critical product. And you can see, I mean, overwhelmingly, folks who responded categorized their most critical product in this sort of like third of the four levels of criticality, which is loss of essential money. And so overwhelming, there was like 57% you can see in that data. There were also some really interesting other answers. And I went ahead and just captured those in this note. If you're interested in seeing that, there were some other folks who didn't feel like these four options fit their specific scenario. And so they gave us a little bit more detail, which was fascinating to see. So check those out. And then on the scale question, this was like very evenly distributed, I would say, like not enough difference here for us to really indicate any or see any real pattern. So interesting that we have engineering teams of many sizes. In the original writings around this, you can see sort of how Alistair Cockburn documented the scale, and he gave each of these levels a letter, and then he used numbers to indicate on the x-axis for scale, and he had these different types of organizations or approaches to product work. I took that same model and just kind of blew it out a little bit for us and put dots in to show sort of how our respondents categorize themselves. And so you can kind of see the variety. We almost hit every square in the bingo card here,
Yeah.
which is kind of cool. But you can see definitely loss of essential money is like the big one for us as a community. Vitaly, what were you expecting to see in these answers? Was there anything in particular, or?
Well, I would say that what doesn't surprise me, of course, is the second one. So basically, everybody is everywhere, and so that just makes sense. This is just a regular distribution that we should be expecting. But
Yeah.
look at the first one. Interesting to see that it's about essential money, not like discretionary money, but essential money. So this is where the loss of money is becoming then really the critical issue. I mean, this is not quite my world, I have to say. So in my world, it's actually also probably would be the other, because this would be the loss of reputation. This is
Yeah.
also, and this is an important one, the loss of trust.
Mm.
I mean, of course, I have been working with the European Parliament, but I also have been working on other things too. And one of the things that we definitely want to achieve with AI, and this is kind of becoming, of course, a never-ending story for us, is, well, how do we ensure that people are still feeling comfortable, confident, and feel like they can trust AI, right? And
Yeah.
so loss of trust is a really big one
Mm-hmm.
for me.
Yeah.
And that, of course, comes in a way to with a lot of things, because ultimately this is just a step in the journey. Ultimately, once you lose trust, you don't use a particular feature maybe, or you lose it, maybe rely too much on it, and then you make mistakes that maybe lead to a loss of money, right? So there's always is kind of somewhere in between, but I think this is a very important step in general.
Yeah.
But it does not, I mean, it surprises me, but I guess that this is just a proxy to a lot of other situations that people in product teams can find themselves.
Yeah. I'm sort of it's almost like a hobby of mine to go dig up things like this, like from our past, as digital product folks, to understand how the thinking in the past has changed from how it operates today. So I love this kind of question where we look at an older way of thinking and sort of compare it now to sort of how we're actually behaving. And I would love to see a more modernized version of this, right? That includes things like loss of reputation, loss of trust, loss of essential data is another one here, loss of transparency, loss of future compatibility. I love this. Amy, I think that
Well,
was
that's
from you.
interesting. Yeah.
So like, I mean, fascinating stuff. And I think that we certainly, the digital product landscape has evolved dramatically since this time, so it's cool to hear that you all have lots of other ideas for how this could expand. All right, folks, this is the moment where you can raise your hand and jump into the conversation. We're going to just start diving in. There's tons of other observations. I did a summary of questions 3 and 4, the open text here, pulled out some quotes, and then looked for some patterns between the first 2 questions and the last 2 questions and found a few. I actually thought it could be fun to start with this because there were a handful of folks who, on question 4, we asked if anybody in your org is doing workflow analysis. So, Vitaly, would you mind that was a question that I think came from our conversation about what should we ask. I'd love to hear from you. Like, what do you mean when you say that? Like, what is workflow analysis to you?
So typically, I think there are a lot of practices and methods that have become almost, outdated. They feel like they're outdated, but I think that they're not really outdated because I think in my world, not a single project starts without doing either task analysis or workflow analysis. Now, there is a difference between the two. The task analysis is when you're looking at the specific task that the person is performing. Now, very often, like one of the first questions that I'm asking, just to give you a bit of context, is I need to understand what people are doing in this product. Not necessarily in terms of what jobs it is hired to do, like jobs to be done, but literally thinking about what are people doing here. So I go to as many people I can find and I ask them the same question. Show me this product, show me how this works, what features are in there and so on. And ideally, this would be end users who end up using the product, but very often it's the makers of the product or the owners of the product. And it's still a very useful perspective to have. And so I maybe get an overview about what we, right? Usually, again, if it's company, what we think the product is doing. But it's important to understand what people think it's doing for them. And so often there is a distinction. And what I try to then understand by eventually really going through this list of tasks, I guess, of what people are doing, what does it require? I kind of always try to find answers to 2 questions. I really jump in because I had too much coffee, maybe bad coffee today, right? The first question I'm asking is, what do people do here? What are the tasks that they are here to do for their work, for whatever success means for them? And then the second question would be, what can I, as a designer, do to help them achieve that goal better? Now, that better can be faster, could be more accurate, could be more resilient, could be, in a better way or whatever, or in a more trustworthy way or something like that. So these are the 2 questions. Now, this is typically the task analysis where I get a task or a list of critical tasks that people are performing, and I try to understand what are people doing here and what do they need to be successful, meaning also what can I do to help them be more successful. Now, that's just taking a task and breaking it down to understand what the goals are, what the needs are, and so on. Like usually the goals are what people say they want. The needs are what they actually want to achieve. So we can talk about the semantics here as well. Now that's task, right? You take a look at task and you break it down to understand what goes in it to define the notion of success. And then there is a workflow analysis. Workflow analysis typically would involve different systems, different people, different actors, right, that are involved for a particular workflow to happen. Now, that workflow could contain a lot of different tasks on its own, right? But usually it's like a process and how this works inside of an organization or a company or a system, like where the data flows and how that all must work together collaboratively between people or between systems or between tools, right, to ensure that the desired outcome can happen. Right? So the task analysis is more like scope to, okay, one person has to complete that particular task, but then that task might be like a very small part of a much bigger workflow that involves a lot of people. Like just to give an example, in a financial application, right? If we're looking at something like an application that monitors stock market, like a task could be to import a portfolio. right? So somebody needs to be able to import a portfolio, right, into that system. So that's a task. We need to make sure that everything that is going in the task can be actually done well. But then the workflow analysis would be something like literally analyzing what's happening on the market, much larger in scope, right? And so that would be very non-linear. That's very important. I mean, I have become quite allergic to user journey maps or customer journey maps because very often they're linear. Um, I would say that a lot of environments have a lot of non-linear flows, workflows. Think about
Yeah.
like financial sector or 3D modeling software, where people are going back and forth and sideways and up and down, and it's all quite messy.
Yeah.
But I still need to understand what are these stages. These are not necessarily linear stages that they're going through, but the different distinct part of the experience that contribute to that workflow to be successful.
So
That's sort of the difference.
Vitaly, you brought this up because I think in your mind, you were making the connection. This is my assumption. You were making the connection between this kind of like rigorous understanding of product needs and user needs as a part of supporting more critical product work. Is that a fair?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. That's right.
Yeah. So I think this question, I was hoping to see or interested to see if individuals who reported that their product was higher on the criticality scale had more of this in their workflows, at least in the org somewhere. And the data didn't bear that out, right? Like what instead what we saw was a connection more to team size, where larger teams have this kind of thing. And actually there's a really interesting this little bit right here, this workflow analysis. It turns out that a lot of organizations don't have this stuff, but this sentence at the end kind of summarizes it. Small teams can't do it because they don't have availability, they don't have bandwidth. Mid-sized teams are blocked from doing it for a lot of different reasons. You can look through the data to see that. And then large teams delegate it away or lose sight of it. And this is like the system team kind of doesn't necessarily see that happening, right? So interesting to see that it was more on the size than it was on the criticality that showed up. Peter, would love to get your voice in. What's up?
Yeah, I actually have like a complete flip of that entire kind of assessment, where I'm a team of one right now, but I leverage AI agents to do a lot of this work. So I have a very kind of like particular workflow in terms of like executing particular scopes of work, and that workflow analysis is pivotal, and it's the only reason I've been able to kind of make as much progress as I have on the work that I have, is because I'm constantly going back and saying, all right, how do we make sure that we have fewer bugs between X and Y? How do we kind of further refine the spec of things? How you basically kind of like iterate over and over and over again to the point where it's like, all right, I had one agent that's kind of working through kind of a basic spec, and then all right, we need to expand the spec to accommodate this. Oh, we have other agents now to kind of split the load. So all these agents need to have a say in their different kind of domain space.
But then I guess, Peter, also just to bring up kind of to build on top of that, I think you also need to think about like the context and how it's flowing, right? So the data is available in the right amount of data and the clean data and all of that. So that makes sense. Yeah.
So I would say that this practice is critical at all levels of everything, which is maybe why you're seeing such a kind of you're not getting a lot of definitive kind of correlations on things, because the need is probably essential across all levels. It's just a matter of people's availability to do it.
That's fair. That's fair, Peter. And I'll just make sure, I just want to make sure I also state this, that the number of folks that we get to answer means this data is not statistically significant, right? Like we're a very biased group of system thinkers, and we've only got 60 answers here, right? So we don't think of it as like, like the end all be all, like stating facts, but more as like conversation starters for this deep dive.
But smart system thinkers.
That's true. Thank you, Vitaly, for pointing that out. Yes.
Just pointing out important.
Yes. Thank you. All right, folks, where do you want to take the conversation? There's lots of interesting data points in here. Tell me what you're curious about. Tell me how you differ. If I see hands, I'll make sure we get them called, but let's go. Oh, Guy, jump in, buddy. What you got?
Why am I always the first? I'm
Courage.
really curious. I don't know. I'm actually it's a question for other people. I'm really curious to hear from the people who said like loss of life. I would love to hear from them, first of all, about the product and how their design system works with that, because that is fascinating to me. Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. I forgot who I'm talking to. Yeah.
Peekaboo. My answer was immediately that. And that was, I was thinking of it in the most extreme, right? In terms of like, if something breaks and I don't know, I'm just gonna make something up. Let's say a style comes through wrong and it shows red when it should have shown green. You know, like who the hell knows, right? Like, because we have identification systems now. Right now, we're only on like the less risky stuff, but we hope to be able to integrate to support those teams. You know, in the grand scheme, the live interfaces like in patient rooms and stuff. Right now, we're just on the portal and the .org sites, like the more live, literal, more traditional methods that we'd think about. But that other one becomes in my head, it becomes a big risk, right? Like, I don't know if that's real, you know, if a color changes. Oh, sorry. Yeah. I'm at the Mayo Clinic. And the design system there. If that happens, like, I don't know if that's a real fear, but it's one I like to architect into like, all right, what happens to prevent this kind of thing? Right now, it may result in that severe of a situation, but like, how do we avoid that in the first place? But I think it's a catch-22 on, and this is, I'll close on this. Like, I think there's also some of these risks that, I don't know, we make up, right? Like, I don't think loss of life is a real risk for my design system, right? I think that's a silly, large burden to put on our design system, right? But it helps us think through gaps in process, right? So I think it's an interesting relationship between like the onus of what we're really talking about. Like, do you really believe that your system has a loss of life or a loss of money or whatever, right? Or is that the onus you're using to really understand the context of the problem? Because I think that's the safer bet. The other one feels a little like, we are superheroes and we control the gate. Yeah. And, you know, at the end of the day, that's a little weird, but that's just me.
Taylor, let's go a little bit deeper, because I know that you have also worked on systems that were not at maybe the criticality of something like Mayo. Yeah. So what's different about your approach here because of that sort of criticality?
Genuinely nothing. I think the difference is the carefulness, right? I think I'm more careful. I'm more curious. I make sure I ask extra questions. I get extra people involved, right? I don't think the process changes at all. I think it's more just different layers of awareness. I think it's more, hey, you know, in Hologram, right? That startup, it was like, cool, move fast, do what you need to do. Like, we trust you, SME, handle it, right? Tell us what happened later. They didn't have time, right? At Fidelity or Mayo, it was like, great, we're super glad we have an SME, but the system connects to a billion things. What's the first domino that falls, you know, kind of thing. Or we've got the reverse where they're like, we don't even know that. And then I bring that point up and it's like, oh, yeah. So there's a lot that just don't know. But to me, I don't think it's any change, really. I think it's more just like, you have to gather some more information initially. You have to make sure you talk to some extra people, and then just make sure you got people along the way you're bringing in. Like for us, like we have security folks that we now know on certain things we need to go check on for a data leak thing because Mayo's very concerned about that. You know, so now we have like certain points where we're like, okay, this is an extra step that I wouldn't normally do, but it supports the greater goal of like, are we going to lose life if we mess up a token? No. But does something cascade down the chain where that could make someone miss something? But like maybe. So why not try to fix it, you know, on something important versus like at Hologram, it was a billing tool. Do we give a shit? No. Like,
I think also it's very interesting for you to say that, Taylor, because for me also, like, this is layering for sure that we kind of have to deal with here. So there are different layers of extra layers of protections to avoid things from happening. That's for me like a risk mitigation and risk management, right?
Exactly.
But I think like, what I think also, like sometimes, and sorry, Hattie and Jay said, I will bring you just in a second. Just to one point, I think that even if you look at something like, again, financial markets, right? And you look at a financial application and you basically communicate something with a dashboard. And then on the dashboard, you have charts. And that chart has a poor charting type. And then you're communicating something in an inaccurate way. People will lose money as a result of that, if they make decisions based on that alone. Or if you feed it into AI and then AI gives you an answer based on whatever it is that it has learned from the data that might be biased, right? Or might be skewed, or might be inaccurate, might be not clean enough. And so those things really do cascade, I think. And very often, I mean, if you look at the system thinking in general, right? We often are very, very bad at estimating the broader impact of those things. And I mean, probably many of you will be familiar with this book. I'm reading now this book, The Fifth Discipline, right? This is a book from 1990 about system thinking. And I think I first read it, I don't know, like 2015 or 16 or so. And I just didn't understand it at all. I was like, what is this? I don't get it and all that. And now being in a slightly different environment, I think it many things resonate much better. So I kind of really feel like this is the connection there as well. So that's a great point, Tanner.
Love it. Thanks, guys. Hattie, what's up? Oh, we can't hear you. Oh, no.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Go for it.
Sorry.
What you got?
I was just going to say, very similar to Taylor. Like, it's not necessarily on the system to be responsible for this type of stuff, but working on things like we have autonomous vehicles. I work at John Deere, and we have to make sure that all the safety warnings, like that doesn't come, like, yes, the system implements what the product and safety team has told us to implement when it comes to the warnings for, you're about to start a vehicle moving or something's happening, but we leave that up to those experts. They tell us, we put it in place, and then we ensure that it's used.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I guess in my mind, I'm thinking about, that's great. They give you, they're like an additional input to your work, Hattie, but do you not have additional checks and balances on the output of your work to make sure that the things you're doing do align with something like a safety team?
Yeah, it all goes through review, like that workflow analysis that's done by like UX, product engineering. There's like the product teams are the ones implementing everything together. So it's on them. They're ultimately responsible for getting sign off from legal and product safety.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense, Hattie. Thank you. Jesse.
Keep my finger on the mute button. So I work in federal, state public benefits programs at NAVA. We leverage the U.S. web design system, which is, again, the design system is created. So our job is to deliver paid family medical leave, unemployment benefits, veteran benefits, food assistance, housing. So you have to do that in a way it's highly accessible, trauma informed, like mobile, usable, performant. I don't have an opinion about the components. A lot of those decisions were made, right? My job is just to implement them. Nothing fancy, less about delight, more about like concise information, humane, human voice, but not in a way that's like, breaking the bank as far as like this or that. So, yeah. Yeah. So I think that I think that's like a different way to approach this. I mean, we do have to make customizations to those systems. So veterans system uses like one set of customizations, housing, because they work for different departments. You have to sort of like act as a coupler to whatever that either state or federal department is and create sort of like a local system. But some of those core decisions have been made, and you get to just focus on business rules. And again, if you don't do this, somebody doesn't eat, somebody doesn't get their benefits, or there's some other kind of delays.
Yeah. Vitaly, what are you thinking here? How's this sitting?
Yeah, I think there is one side that at least has been quite, I would say, visible in my world, and that's the notion of legacy and the impacts of going or working with legacy. And what I mean by that is that very often what we end up is a situation where the more you connect yourself with the legacy system that's been around for a long time, and that legacy can be fragile, can be outdated, can be slow, can be all those things, right? That creates this point of failure that can really break the whole experience despite everything that we do around. I mean, if you look into like how those things must be cooperating and working together, I've been struggling to find a way of how to establish certain ways of working, I guess, to integrate legacy in some meaningful way in a beautifully, elegantly designed design system that has all the right whistles and bells. So that seems like this fragile point that can really break this experience. And to me, this actually heavily increases the level of criticality of that system, not necessarily design system, but of that product that we're designing, right? So I really was struggling to find any way to bring that component, that consideration, because usually you cannot even touch on legacy. You need to be very careful with legacy and all of that, but it needs to work within the beautifully orchestrated world around it. And that creates an enormous problem also because often the things that live in legacy are very different from what is living outside of legacy, right? So you kind of go through this really strange step, and that breaks the experience at times.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if anybody had similar experience on that. But that for me is also another level of criticality.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. Taylor, thoughts on that? Or
yeah, I want to push on that hard. I don't think we talk about the legacy thing enough, right? I think you're right. But like it defines so much of what we're capable of doing in a certain place, and then becomes the thing that makes it look like that is what the system is capable of. And then that thwarts the views of leadership and all that sort of stuff. So I think this layer is a lot larger. It's like an iceberg, right? Like we talk about it and we know it's under the water, but we never really know until you start poking at things or you start opening the door. You start going, which product do we get? And then it's like,
no, Taylor, you don't knock on the door. It can just break apart immediately.
Absolutely,
you
it's Pandora's box.
Yeah, you
never know.
You just
but
hook around it.
but it's the thing we have to ask about, right? Because it's like such a lynch point to your point on like the success of what we're trying to do next, right? So I think it's a huge layer that often goes like not unrecognized or isn't given enough juice because I think it's one of those things. It's the same thing with like design debt and tech debt. Everyone wants the fancy new thing, and that's great. But sometimes we have to fix the really hard, old, beat up thing that like is really blocking us, but it takes too much time and effort. So like I think this is it's another form of debt that we are allowing to continue in our profession, so to speak. On like, hey, we need to handle the old thing, the broken thing. We're creating more debt by adding more layers to this. Anyway, that's where my head is on that. And your legacy system thing triggered like I don't think we talk about that enough at all. Yeah. Like because there's so many different tools involved, code stacks, products.
Yeah, for real. Kele, jump in.
Yeah, apologies for being camera off. I've been fighting a cold, so we're going voice only today. But yeah, I just want to echo very much this idea of like legacy and tech debt and what a interesting challenge that is. I think especially right now with all of the AI constant chatter happening. I'm coming mostly from really pretty large enterprise SaaS environments. A lot of times that have a product or multiple products in flight in big like financial or energy sector systems. And not only do they want to now integrate a design system into this existing chaos of multiple products, but they also have all of this existing tech debt or limitations, but also they've heard about AI tools, which are cool. So can we just like plug those in real quick and make everything automated, but also not change our tech stack or interrupt any existing features or workflows? So it's a really interesting tug of war to figure out where you can start to make some inroads in updating things and finding the places where you can start to standardize or make shared tools or introduce automations without telling everyone to just like, well, just don't ship anything for a little while we figure this out. That's not an option.
Nobody wants to hear that. Yeah.
Right. It's just not even on the table. So I think that's a really interesting intersection to live in right now where I've had some conversations about, well, that's cool. I think it's neat that you want to start using some of these tools, but here's what it would look like for us to actually do that in practice and level setting what that would take with leaders who have just seen, as Sarah just said, the magic wand of like, or I dream of genie, like wiggle your nose and poof, the agents just do it all on their own. Yeah. But getting to that point when you're not starting at zero is much more complicated.
Kele, say a little bit more about how you're responsibly pushing back against those sort of magic wand statements.
Yeah, I think a lot of times leaders are just hearing this will save you money and this will make it fast. And I think we all know like that's like, yes, maybe, but also yes, and there's, I think, trying to shoehorn any tool, AI is the current buzzword, but any new tool, any new process into a system just because other people is not always the right answer. And so I think I'm a person who likes to ask a lot of questions, maybe too many questions for some people, about like what do we think we're going to get out of this, and like where is this going to actually improve our workflow or more importantly probably the end user experience, and trying to make really smart decisions about like, okay, cool, let's maybe experiment with this tool on the side and see what it's like instead of let's try to run full speed into plugging this into a product, and just trying to show leaders like, hey, here's a cool thing we can do, and this is realistic, and this is what the results look like. And maybe it makes just as an example, maybe this tool makes the brainstorming process faster, but it doesn't actually give us the level of polish that you've maybe been brought to expect. And so that will save us time here, but it will also mean that we have to involve these steps over here that maybe you didn't think about yet.
Yeah.
And just trying to get really realistic with people about what the tools are currently capable of. And like I said, the amount of effort that it might take to train a team on those tools and actually get them up and running within the confines of the rest of the system.
Yeah. It's so hard when the tools are changing so fast, and what is possible with those tools is changing just as fast. So yeah. Greg, jump in.
Yeah, I'm going to pull on this thread a little bit more too, because I agree with these two comments Sarah and Guy put in the chat here. Like, I think there's a lot of opportunity to use some of these new tools to help with, if the goal is to say you've got legacy stuff and you need to update accessibility, and the best way to do that is use the design system. Like, there's a lot of opportunity to be able to do that in a little more, I'll say, automated, but also like, because AI and automation are often confused and sometimes, overlap and all those kinds of things. And, that the automation part of it, you could use AI to build an automation tool to help you do the things.
Mm-hmm.
Or the AI is going to use some automation in concert with what it's doing to do some stuff. But the idea of migration stuff feels like using AI tooling will allow people to do those things faster than they were able to before, and maybe deeper and better, which is exciting. But again, I definitely agree with don't pick a project that's critical and has all the same risk and real world timelines and everything that your actual current workload is expected to adhere against, because that sounds like a really risky thing to do. But a lot of teams that's how they're doing things. They're just like, well, we're just going to integrate stuff in, and then they don't know how any of the things that they're going to use or how they work, and it's the first time they're trying to do it, and they have timeline expectations that are unrealistic. And in the case of my organization, like, we have built some tools to integrate into some of these workflows, but the expectations around those tools are deviate from the reality of what the tools can do, because we haven't spent the time to temper those expectations.
Yeah.
And so people are just like picking it up and expecting it to be magic. And then when it's not magic, they're like, hey, what's wrong with this thing? And we're like, what do you mean what's wrong? That's what it does. Like, you have to do work still after you get the thing. And they're like, what do you mean we have to do work? Like, it's supposed to just do everything, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Vitaly, please.
Yeah, just one thing, and not on that. I think is a very good point by Greg as well, and by Sarah and by Guy too. I think one thing that we learned the hard way, of course, is that whenever you're migrating away from legacy to something newer, better, whatever, you never just do that, right? There is always another journey that you have to keep in mind, which is you migrating processes, the ways of thinking, the tooling, the everything, right? And very often this is what really can break experience at the point where people cannot afford it, because a lot of times the legacy is where the critical parts, the mission critical part of the entire business lives. Right? They can't just say, well, it doesn't work anymore for now. That's just not an option. So you kind of have to slowly migrate everything around that legacy as well, along with it, and all the different connections, all different relationships, and all the different ways of communication, ways of working, ways of everything. And that needs to be designed too, right? So that's, AI cannot automate that. Right? You cannot just create a new way of working and say, well, please do that now. And people are like, hold on for a moment, we don't know how that works anymore. Right? Yeah. So that's another side of it.
The change management side of legacy stuff is enormous. And
it's fun.
Yeah. I like it. I don't know if everybody else does, but I do enjoy it. It's
Sounds
tough.
like a topic for another session.
Maybe. Yeah. One other thought before we bring you up, Jesse, is on Greg's just kind of comment there. I just kept thinking about how there's like this element of it's like FOMO. Like leaders have this fear of, like, they're making decisions based on fear. That's what it feels like to me. If I don't do this and everybody else does, what's going to happen, you know? And I feel like that anytime we're making decisions based on fear, it feels to me like that's not the right way to make these kinds of choices. So I don't know what to do with that, but that's just like this feeling I keep getting. Jesse, jump into the combo.
Oh, I was going to double click on this idea of is there a way to document it so it's good for humans and machines at the same time? Like I love this example about this accessibility markdown example of this guy's created this thing. It's like, is this human readable? Humans can read this. New people on teams can learn about accessibility. It's also written in a way that a machine can read it and also kind of like get up to speed as well. Like I don't know what that looks like, but I like that as an example of like the pace layers, like let's move slow and move fast at the same time. Let's make sure that the humans have documentation, and then if the robots need to go faster, they can do that too.
Yeah, I love that. I think my learning around this so far is that we're in a stage where creating things that are more easily understandable by humans also makes them more easily understandable by our current iteration of AIs. But I actually don't think that's going to be the case long term, because I think that is not the most efficient way for two pieces of software to communicate. That sort of assumes humans have to have eyes on a thing, right? So we'll see where that goes. But Taylor, jump in.
Yeah, I was thinking about we talked about, like, you know, you've got legacy processes and the tools and all the things in there, but I think the other, like, you know, elephant in the corner is just the politics, right? You've got other leaders that have had that thing and it worked or it didn't work, right? And you're having to come in and go, hey, so you know that thing where there's this new thing we're doing and we have to delete the work you spent your whole last 10 years on, right? Or something. And they're like, oh, no, we don't do that. Or people are like, don't talk to so-and-so. That's their baby. We're not getting rid of that. You know, like all of that stuff. Like, so I think that plays a huge role, you know, and I don't think it's wrong per se, but I think we do tend to forget that the web is iterative, right? And it's supposed to be ever moving. It's not meant to be this thing we hold on to forever, but the challenge is our careers are architected in a way where we consider success all of that stuff, right?
Yeah.
Not can we get the next thing right? It's like, how many clicks, how many whatever. So like in essence, I think a lot of what we're talking about here is great. And I think it's at the IC level, right? For like an individual contributor working on something, their career incentives, goals, assignments are at the opposite of paying attention to these things. They are incentivized to do the thing quicker, faster, more efficiently, you know, in the cleanest, happiest way to make their KPI for delivery metrics. And then us systems folks are like, Jesus Christ, can someone call us first? And then it's like, well, we're in the same room, different, you know, charters. And I think that's often the other piece that's like, that one doesn't get resolved, right? Because we all talk in our echo chamber here, and just for shits and giggles, right? About like what we're talking about. And then the ICs are still out complaining the system ain't working for them. And then there's that middle ground, right? Where we're like, all right, we still got to work on the thing, you know, and then we can't get to the other piece because there's so much other misaligned incentives or old ownership and weird politics that are just like, hey, don't touch, don't talk. And it's like, okay, but if we do that, then that's a linchpin on the program you've asked me to do here. Right. And if it's don't talk about it, then it's going to look like I messed up. And that's the big circle. Like, cool, then my individual career KPI, nonsense, whatever, is at risk. So I'm going to do different things that may not be right for the system. You know, so it's like the individual goal incentive-y thing starts to become such a huge play, especially in like today's world where everyone's scared for their job. So it's just an interesting social layer.
Yeah. And organizations don't have, in my experience, most organizations don't have the different incentive structures for systems thinkers versus product thinkers. And instead, we just cram systems folks into the incentives that product teams have, because that's what's existed in the org, right? It's like legacy incentives is what we're talking about. And we actually need both of those teams to be incentivized differently. And that's the healthy tension that we want in an org, you know, but most people just they don't do that. So, Great conversation so far, folks. Would love to hear. We've got just about 5 minutes left here. So what else do you see in this data, or would you like to discuss here while we've got all these brilliant minds?
We kind of sort of talked about it in chat for like a second, but Amy Lee brought up something like product incentives and system incentives being separate. And then like it made me think about the idea of like everyone's like healthy tension, and it's like, yeah, but that what feels like at the leadership level. Then like ICs, it's like that just becomes I got to do what I got to do to make my goal thing. So I think there's that. I was reading Amy's note, and I was like, that's interesting because that is the simple way to say it, right? Like we have different product versus system incentives. That is true. And then there's also the people layer, and then the goal layer, and then the like just thinking of this idea of layers, right? Like those incentives are so forked, right? There's the product, and then there's the people working on the product. Right? There's the system, and then the people working on the system. And then there's like all the layers in between that then start to shift how decisions get made, why people start to do certain things, why they forego a discovery project, right? That maybe would have shown that something was at risk or not a good idea or a good idea for time, all those things. It ends up being tension becomes a reason to ditch things or move faster or make a choice versus encourage better conversation. I think sometimes that's the band-aid over it. It's like, oh, it's healthy tension. It's like, no, they're arguing. Like that's not a productive conversation.
Yeah.
That's not healthy tension. Like that's like they're eventually gonna be at odds, and then we're gonna have that thing where brand doesn't talk to the system.
Yeah. That to me is a sign of just like toxic environment, right? Like if we cannot disagree and then commit to a path and still stay friends, that's a problem because that's how you do good work.
I don't disagree, but I can only speak for myself. I have never had an enterprise environment where that's not been the case. There's just too many people involved.
Yeah.
Right. Like small companies, you can kind of suss that out. But once you hit a certain threshold of people, there's always people that are going to be there that are just annoying. You know what I mean? Like,
well, I would say opinionated, but annoying might be fine too.
Yeah. Kelly.
Yeah. So again, large corporate SaaS environment world. Yeah. And I could not agree anymore. I think like in my perfect working environment, the word instead of tension that I like is friction. And I think there is such a thing as like good creative friction about a project in theory. But yeah, like on a working team, that friction is usually just because people have different mandates. And one person has been told, like, I don't care about scalability. I don't care about systems. You have a deadline to hit. If you don't hit it, you're in trouble. So at the end of the day, they don't give a crap about my idea about I'm going to build this really cool, scalable, reusable thing, because to them, it's like, it's got to get out the door on Thursday. And I don't care about your design system at all. And I think that's really unfortunate. And I do think it's the larger a team gets, the harder it is to break that. Because
really, to your point, and then teams aren't willing to change their timelines to make nice with each other.
Right, exactly.
Like that's the piece you were like hitting on. It was like, that's the other thing. It's like, and they're not even wanting to have that discussion. It's just like, this is mine, this is yours.
And I think in fairness to them, and because it's been my personal experience too, sometimes it's less about like individual people aren't willing to be flexible as like leadership is giving really confusing information.
Totally.
And so if leadership on one team is like, yeah, cool, build this awesome roadmap and do all this really smart structural scalable system work. But then the people who are actually doing feature work on a day-to-day basis are getting told something completely different. That's just fundamentally unfair to the teams. Like, how are you supposed to work well together when you're being given completely different goals to hit? So that's just like an unfortunate thing about business and about this kind of race to the bottom of like who can do it the fastest. And I get the idea of like, don't let great be the enemy of good, but I also think good enough is kind of like a crappy way to approach any product, because who wants like it technically works, but like it could have been really cool. And it could we could avoid a whole lot of like stupid rework if we just took 5 extra seconds to do it right the first time. So I think that's a friction point for me that I am always trying to fight from a design systems and like advocating from the side of like, hey, maybe it would make sense to slow down and think about this a little bit more. And, there's always leadership that's like, nope, absolutely not. So
right.
That's fighting the good fight, I guess.
You're preaching, Kelly. Thank you. Everybody's nodding and you're getting lots of thumbs up. So appreciate the perspective. Y'all, we did it again. An hour is gone in like 3 minutes, it seems like. So thank you so much for being here, everybody. Vitaly, love sharing this hour with you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, this has been my pleasure. This is very interesting, very exciting to be, to kind of hear the sound of myself coming through somehow. So we think we're on the same boat in one way or another.
Yes, amazing. There's so much cool stuff happening in the space, y'all. Check out Redwoods if you like this kind of engaging conversation. Redwoods is open to membership. You can get all the info here. Check out the values and let us know if that aligns. We'd love to have you join. There's tons of events happening. I'm going to be in London for UX London early June. Would love to see you there if you're on that side of the world. Last episode's YouTube and podcast episodes are done with Hannah, so check those out. Tons of good writing and podcasts from folks over in Redwoods here. Check all those out. And again, of course, this does not work unless you all take time to share your expertise. So thank you for being generous with your knowledge and your experience. Taylor, you want the last word, I see.
Sure. Yeah. I just wanted to say extra thank you to Vitaly. Like, I just think there's a lot of stuff that, you get a lot of attention online and your numbers are always high, but I don't know that people are able to tell you like how actually helpful that information is. Like
that's so
time savings you've been able to do. Like, I can just send my team, here's a link of stuff. I don't have to do the digging. I know that Vitaly vetted it. Like, I can't explain to you how much that has like saved time and effort. So please keep doing it if you.
Thank you so much. That's very kind of you to say, Taylor. And everyone, of course, as well. Thank you so much for joining in and for all your kind words.
We'll have you back for sure. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you soon. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us on episode 071 of The Question. This format doesn't work unless folks like you are willing to share some of your experience and then show up here in learning mode. Remember, you can get access to the raw data, the collaborative FigJam, and all of the recordings for this episode on my website, bencallahan.com. If you or your team could use an outside perspective on your design system program, I'd be honored to support you in that way. There's much more information about my individual and team coaching program over on the website. Thanks for being here, and remember, stay in learning mode.